hopefully we can overcome some of the top time wasters in our day through today's session. Jake and I will be walking through what we believe to be the top 10. May have a bonus one in there for you as well. But I think we have to think about, most people know that they waste time just in life in general, but us as fundraisers, I think we're constantly saying there's just not enough time to do all the things that I need to do. I know I need to raise money, but I also need to handle this and this and this and this. And, I think that we know that we can't get everything done, right? These jobs that we have, whether we're volunteers or staff in philanthropy, there is always going to be something that doesn't get done. And I think instead of focusing on getting everything done, we need to focus on getting the right things done. So hopefully, if we're helpful today in helping you identify some of your top time wasters, maybe you can overcome this and get some productive time back into your day. So with that, let's jump into the first slide. I wanted to start us with that sort of how do we identify the top time wasters, right? If we walked through our day today, take today, for example, and ask the question, why? I think we could be like a 4-year-old. I was recently talking to someone about the various ages of children. And I think 4-year-olds ask that question, why, more than any other human being. So let's try to be a 4-year-old today and just ask the question, why? Why am I doing this? About every single thing that we're doing. I think that we would be able to be a little more proactive on if it supports our mission, our goal, our objective, whether it be for that day or for the overall program that we're working to work towards. If it's not supporting the objective, I think we need to seriously assess whether or not it is a time waster or it is productive, right? So let's be 4-year-olds and ask that question, why? Is it clear which activities deliver results? Okay. Do we have I kind of like to think of this like a science experiment, right? Do we know what we're doing that's actually delivering results? Are we taking time to look at the data? Are we recognizing that if we are spending all this time on an event that only raises $5,000, did we assess how much time it took us to raise that $5,000? Did we assess the fact that if we spent that same amount of time on our major gifts program, that maybe we would have a much greater impact? Okay, looking at which activities do we do that actually deliver results. So I think as we're looking at our activities and throughout our day, looking at that is so important, right? Results, thinking about results. The results we're looking for, newsflash, are to optimize our fundraising revenue. Okay, that is our goal. That is why we exist. Our organizations, our philanthropy departments, we exist to maximize the most possible revenue that we can bring to the organization to have the greatest impact for our cause, right? So keep that in mind. What's going to deliver those results, those financial results? I love this one. As we're looking to identify what is a time waster, are we confusing activity with productivity? I think we do this a lot, just in life in general, right? Like, I'm so busy, I've got all this going on. And then we stop at the end of the day and we're like, what did I actually accomplish? If we look at something, I think it would be better to take the time to take a break in our day so we can hit that reset button and see clearly than it is to stay busy all day, right? So is activity the same thing as productivity? No, it's not. So what do we need to do to be productive versus just busy and busy work and having activity in our day? I think it's important to ask the question, can I assign this task to someone else, right? We like to take on so many things. Most of us know all the things that need to be done, and it's easier to just do them ourselves, right? Instead of trying to get others involved. And newsflash, we are constantly trying to tell you to work with a volunteer force of 30 to 50 individuals, right? You got to delegate. It's important to figure out if what you're doing is the best use of your time, or if there's someone else better equipped to do that, whether it's on your staff, whether it's in your volunteers. So looking at our tasks in a day and saying, is this something I can assign to someone else? And being okay with taking a little time to explain it and properly get someone set up for success is an important piece to that. Otherwise, it's going to be wasting everyone's time, right? And so are we continually reevaluating for efficiency? I think that's one of the best ways to make sure that we're not wasting time, because something that may have been productive and effective maybe loses its productivity if you have new tasks that may come into place. So I think it's important to be reevaluating on a consistent basis. Maybe that's monthly. What am I doing that might not be delivering results? How can I prioritize here? Why am I doing what I'm doing on a monthly, weekly, daily basis? But I think the point is that we need to reevaluate to make sure that we're as efficient as possible. Don't do it one time, say, hey, this is really great. I took some good notes today. I looked at some things that, wow, I know I do that. And I'm going to set myself up for the next 10 years, right? Things change, times change, people change, your circumstances change, and we need to be constantly reevaluating to make sure we're efficient, right? Okay, so drum roll, please. We're going to go down into that top 10 and talk through those, what we believe to be the top 10 time wasters. First one. I know this is going to come as a shock, but social media can be a black hole. Resist that urge to go down it. This does not mean that social media actually does not play a role in fundraising. I am a firm believer that it is a very valuable tool when we're researching, who does that person know? What are they involved? When you're doing research and you're gathering information about how you might be able to connect with someone in your community who might be interested in your cause, social media can give you some great information as far as who they know, what things they're interested in. Those are all valuable things. But I think the biggest takeaway with social media from our perspective and our jobs is that we probably need to have a time frame, limited amount of time that we're doing research on social media or what we're using it for, or we'll just scroll right on down in that black hole and we'll never come out of it. It's just the nature of it, right? So I think social media can be a big black hole. And I know that also using social media for our fundraising efforts is another piece. But we talk about this as well. You cannot sit and put all of your eggs in that basket, because fundraising is a one-on-one sport. It's not a marketing thing. It's not a put it out there. So this is a tool that we can use, but we need to resist the urge to go too deep into social media. Time waster number one. Number two, interruptions and alerts, right? I think that setting boundaries is so important. Whether you work in an office with other people where everybody just kind of walks in on each other and plops himself down and starts talking to you in the middle of your workflow, whether you are in a home office and you're there by yourself and you get interrupted because the doorbell's ringing or the dog's barking or there's something else that just took your attention, we cannot be as efficient and effective as possible if we don't set boundaries. So knowing what it is that triggers you and interrupts you, and noticing that and being okay saying, this is more important right in front of me right now. The work I'm doing is more important than whatever that interruption is, and being okay with saying, hey, I'm really sorry, I'm in the middle of something. I'd love, if someone just walks into your office and plops down and thinks that it's a good time to solve the world's problems and you've got a deadline with something else, you got to be okay with saying, hey, I would love to talk with you about it. Now is not the best time for me. How about, 3 p.m.? How about tomorrow? Set that up. And then the alerts. How many of us have way too many alerts on our phones? Or on our desktop, our laptop computers? There are constantly things coming up. And I think about that with my kids all the time. I'm like, I never had to have those distractions. Like, no wonder why kids have, anxiety and things happening, right? We've got to deal with these things. I think turning off most of your alerts on your phone, especially during your productive work hours, is going to be so helpful if you constantly are being interrupted. That's a huge time waster. So, all right, next we have Working without a plan. Y'all, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. This is, I think you need to approach not only your overall, let's start from a project or a campaign. You got to have a plan, a big picture plan, right? To get you where you need to go. But you also have to have bite-sized plans. You've got to look at, maybe it's an annual plan. We help you with that in the planning and scheduling and doing that on a Gantt. Maybe it's a monthly plan, maybe it's a weekly plan, but also a daily plan. If you sit down at your desk at the beginning of the day and you don't really have a game plan for what you're going to set out to accomplish, you're probably not going to get much of anything done. You're going to take whatever's coming at you and deflect it off. But you've got to have a plan. So making sure that every single objective that you have a plan to go along with it is going to help you to minimize the time waste. So make sure that we are planning so that we can work our plan. Plan your work so you can work your plan. All right, number 4. Little delay. Taking on other people's tasks and challenges. If y'all are like me, I have a hard time saying no to things. I'm a pleaser. I'm like, yes, we can do that. Yes, that's a good idea. Let's do it right now. There's no time like the present, right? What is a worse way to get distracted than to just jump into something new and go after that, right? So I think when people bring a challenge or a problem, whether it's a donor, whether it's a volunteer, whether it's a coworker, whether it's someone who just pops into your office, be smart about taking on their tasks and challenges. I think especially if you're goal oriented, you're like, well, we can do that. Let's do that. Where it's the minute idea of the month club, right? In a committee meeting, people say, hey, we should do this. Why don't you staff go do that? Rather than saying, oh, yes, let's research that. You say, you research that and bring it back to me and we'll see if that's a good idea. Make sure that you're not taking on everybody else's challenges or everybody else's ideas. And don't say yes to everything. That you're going to waste time that you could have used going towards your objectives and goals. Number 5, worrying about things outside of your control. Anxiety can debilitate like nothing else, right? How often do we say, I have so much to do today, and it's just floating? That comes back to that plan, right? I don't have a plan. I have so much to do. I need to accomplish 70,000 things. But then if we actually take the time, write it down, come up with a plan, have a to-do list. Wow, there's actually really 3 important things for me to do. I'm worrying about things that are outside of my control, I can't affect. And if I just dive in and take care of those things, I now have that feeling of accomplishment. I have now started working my way towards something, and I am not wasting my time worrying about everything else that's floating up here. We can definitely cause ourselves a lot of stress by worrying about this. Number 6, perfectionism. How many of us think we have to do all the research and then we have to be super prepared before we can go ask people? And we take, 6 months working on something that we could have picked up the phone and done today because we were so worried that we had to have the perfect ask. We had to have the perfect amount of information. We had to have the perfect, verbiage. So I spent time wordsmithing something. We have to sometimes be okay with good enough. And that's a hard thing if you're a perfectionist, right? There is not time to spend on that on your day-to-day if you're running out of time for all of the tasks that you have to do. So just make sure that we don't get bogged down in unnecessary details. Now, does that mean don't pay attention to details? No, we should pay attention to details. People notice when we took the time to do our research and that we took the time to notice something special and unique about them, and we acknowledged something that they had said in the past. That's important. So details are important, but let's not get bogged down in those unnecessary details. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Jake to bring us home.
All right. Thanks so much, Marty. Number 7, unnecessary meetings. Some things that can be better accomplished by email or phone call. Now, this is really hard to determine in advance a lot of times. This is kind of something that we tend to feel in the meeting. You get a little bit in and you're like, this could have been an email, it could have been a Slack message, a Teams message, whatever. And it's hard to prepare for. So the way that we like to segment this, and as just a general rule of thumb, a way to figure out if this is worthwhile or not, is ask yourself how much discussion and brainstorming and group information this needs. If it's one person talking, giving information out 9 times out of 10, unless it's really important or it's just going to be easier to do over a meeting, probably can be in some sort of a text announcement that can go out to everybody that they can read at a more organized time. They can block and batch those things. But if it requires something where you're going to have to make a decision as a group, you're going to have to brainstorm ideas, make lists, and there's going to be a lot of group facilitated discussion, and that everyone in that meeting will have some thoughts and information to contribute to whatever those topics are. That's when we need to gather together. Otherwise, we pretty much can nix everything else. We tend to have too many meetings, not enough meetings. We'll notice pretty quickly if we need to gather on things, but a lot of times we get together and we realize, I'm glad we did this quickly, or this was fine, but we really could have had this over a couple of messages or an email thread. It would be fine. So really think, kind of look at your schedule for the meetings for the next week and say, how many of these truly can be informational that's sent out? Are we meeting every morning as a team just because we feel like we need to? If we don't really have a lot, are we canceling? Are we just kind of going and doing it anyways because it's what we always do? Just walk through your weekly agenda and your repetitive meetings particularly and say, what are the purposes of these? Are these purposeful? Are they going to help us communicate better, or can we save some time by doing through text or email? Number 8, group emailing and expecting significant movement. Email is not really built in a way that allows for good group discussion. We talk about Teams and Slack. There's also things like Trello, Monday.com. There's like a gazillion millennial type tech firms that have some kind of a tool software that everyone, Yammer, there's all these weird ones. Those are much better in terms of topic discussion than email thread. We've probably been all been on email threads where like one person's having a discussion in the middle of 2 other people are talking and everybody's replying all, and it gets all jumbled. And it also takes the entire block of text that everyone else has said and it adds to it and adds to it and it multiplies, becomes this giant stack. Some programs are good at kind of figuring out how to smartly set that up and make it, like Outlook does a pretty good job of this most of the time. But it's not a great place for quickly going through a discussion. It's kind of the opposite of tip number 7 of like, if this warrants a lot of talking back and forth and decision making, it's going to be a lot easier just to get everyone in the room or have everyone hop on Zoom for 5 minutes and figure it out. If you have this message that goes out to everybody, hopefully it's an announcement type that doesn't have some kind of back and forth. We're going to try to move this thing along. It can also take time. Some people are really disciplined about like, I batch my email answering to these 3 times a day, or this 2 times a day. I check when I first get in, or I check at 2:00 in the afternoon, and I try to stay off email so I can be productive in between. And if everyone has different times of day that they're doing that, it might be 24, 48 hours before 3 people have responded to try to get everything figured out. So what we try to do as much as we can is say, if it's a singular announcement that goes out to everybody, and it doesn't require a lot of response back, or just like an, okay, hey, I just need everyone's approval on this, that's probably fine. But if we're trying to make decisions and have discussion, try to do it either in one of those messaging apps. GroupMe is another great one. It's free and easy. Or have a quick Zoom meeting, in-person meeting, whatever you need to do to get it done. So those are kind of the flip-flop of each other, but it's just a way of segmenting, like, how do we send out information? What type of information are we talking about? And what's going to be the most effective and efficient medium to use those? So both really not doing new things, just kind of grouping them appropriately will save you a ton of time. Number 9, cold calling. Everyone's least favorite thing. It's extremely difficult to get on the phone with someone who you don't know at all. There is a place for calling people, especially calling prospects, major give or annual giving donors and prospects. But usually we have some sort of an email or mail cadence that goes out, or we're segmenting our mailing list to people who may already know us. If we know that this person has no connection to the organization whatsoever, and we're just going to go like, we're going to call 1,000 people and 100 of those will pick up, and 10 of those will talk to us, and then 2 of those will give us a gift. It's just like the numbers don't quite work. We know that we can focus better when we're working on pipelining for people who have some sort of familiarity with us. They've come to an event, they've given some amount online, they've connected with us on social media. We know them personally. They know a volunteer personally. A volunteer knows them. Like, there's so many ways you can connect people to the organization. But if they've never heard of you, we know that trying to just mass market out in the way that like Coca-Cola or Apple markets is very different. We see these really big marketing firms, and they have, or these really big companies have big marketing departments, and they have a way of doing things. And we say, oh, as our small nonprofit, we're going to do just like that. Like Tesla, their marketing is so good. We love what Tesla does. Everyone knows what Tesla is. It's because they're so large. They have that kind of built-in brand recognition that they're allowed to do marketing differently. And that's something that we don't have the luxury of as a small business or a small nonprofit. So we know that our approach has to be not optimized to the best, but optimized for our community. So trying to not focus on cold calls really goes a long way. And number 10 here, scattered low return on investment fundraising events and efforts. So we know that this is not kind of a day-to-day time waster, but it can take like a chunk of our year out. Say we have a big event that happens every October and we must do it, or someone mandates that we must do it. We'll lose probably 60 to 90 days leading up to that event, just with the planning and the prep and all of that. And there's some events that are very effective. If you net 7 figures, 6 figures, it's not a lot to do that. But if you do that, maybe it's worth it to have one a year, especially if a couple of staff people working on it, or you have a volunteer committee, or you can hire an event coordinator to help put a lot of it together. But really think about your lost opportunity cost, saying we netted $100,000. That was very successful. We planned for 90 days. Like, how many major gifts conversations, how many lunches could you have with a donor and ask for $100,000 over 3 months? Even if you had one a week over 3 months and you got 2 of them, in 3 months, which hopefully as fundraisers, we're doing a little better than that. But say you only got 2, your revenue's already doubled. So we know that it's kind of all over the place. And unfortunately, we wrote an article about this last week, but if you Google like fundraising ideas, which if you're starting a nonprofit or you have a small startup or you have a cause, people will do that because someone's tasked with fundraising. Everything on Google comes out as fundraising events. So like, here are all these ideas. Every single idea is an event. It's terrible. And it's not really the fault of the brand new nonprofit and the brand new fundraiser for Googling and trying to learn, but it is the fault of the industry for convincing them that's a good idea. So we're trying to hopefully change that and move the needle a little bit towards the things that we know are going to drive revenue to the organization. And major gifts obviously is it. And if you have to do one very impactful event, or you think it's effective and you think it really is helping with friend raising or all the other terms people throw around, definitely try to leave it to just the one. We know the top earning programs have 0, but 1 if you have to. And we thought we would add a bonus tip. We always try to do like the top 5, the top 10, but sometimes there's like a really good 11th one. And instead of eliminating one of the things that we're going to tell you to make it a nice round number, we're just adding 11. So I know the title of the thing was top 10 tips. It's 11. We lied to you. I'm sorry. Unprepared volunteers. So we recruit volunteers. They're very excited. They want to help. They've never been fundraisers before. We tell them, don't worry, it's going to be okay. You're going to get training. We're going to equip you for success. And then on the first meeting, we say, okay, everybody go out and find 5 donors or talk to 5 people. And we haven't given them any kind of training or directive or done connector, cultivator, closer training with them to figure out what their role is, and just say, go forth and fundraise. Now that you're a volunteer, you work for me and you're going to bring us money. Whereas they're like, I've never done this. And sometimes if they feel uncomfortable, they're not going to say that right there in the meeting. They might keep showing up, or they might just ghost you, and you're 2 or 3 months behind because you spend all this time recruiting your volunteer teams, and then they don't come back and go through and fulfill the thing that you wanted them to do. And you think, oh, they hate us. It's like, they don't. They just feel uncomfortable, and sometimes they're embarrassed to say. So making sure in those first couple of meetings, you're giving them proper training and directives, and here are your responsibilities during the meetings and in between them. It saves you a ton of time because you're not having to start over several times before you actually get going. So just spending a little extra time in the beginning, it feels like it's additional time, not a time saver. But if you can get your program and your structure put in place early, it saves you so much time in the long run. So just thought we'd mention that. Last thing here before we wrap, got a couple of things we wanted to chat through. Just some additional tips. These are the things that we've identified as when we see programs that say, oh, we don't have enough time, and we kind of do a staff time analysis, or we do an audit of kind of where the development team is spending their time, those are the things that come up the most that we can eliminate or change. Those are the 11 things that we love to try to adjust, and they're easy fixes usually. But here's just some kind of general tips that work in any industry, but particularly in fundraising. First is to look at your priorities and manage your actions. So even if you have 12 things on your to-do list and you're like, truly, I must do these 12 things. I like either my boss or somebody, there's a deadline. These are very important things. I can't not do, like, I can't eliminate stuff. I'm sorry. I can't save time. Must do these things. Great. Just at least rank them from most important to least important. Like, how catastrophic would it be if this one didn't happen? Okay. And then rank that against this one and just kind of reorder them. So take the 5 minutes at the end of your day for tomorrow, or the 5 minutes at the beginning of your each day, and look at, say, here's my to-do list. We tend to pick the things that are like the easiest or the quickest, or the ones that we want to do the most, because that's just the human tendency. We're going to talk a lot about that at PDI in our psychology session. It's going to be great. But if you can, try to start with which has the most catastrophic results if I don't do it. Put that one right at the top. I think some people call it eating the frog, or some people call it that one thing. Like, put one thing on your to-do list every day. It's called that one thing. There's lots of like time waster guru type people who recommend this, but if you can kind of order that list, put it right at the top, makes a big difference. Do low value activities when your energy level is low. So when you are excited and motivated, if you're a morning person, do the hard tasks when you're excited and motivated. Don't be like, oh, I'm going to knock out all this easy stuff, and then I'm going to get like a nice momentum going. And then after I get like 8 tasks done, then I'll do that thing that I know that I shouldn't, or I know that it's going to be a little more difficult to do. It's like, do that thing that you don't want to do and you know is going to require a lot of brain power when you have brain power. And so for some people, that's first thing in the morning, and some people have a better afternoon. They kind of wake up as they go, and they're not morning people. And you know probably at this point which one you are. And that's okay if you do your best work in the evenings or afternoons, in the mornings, or whenever, right after lunch, right before lunch. But find that thing that you know is difficult and takes time, and put it on your calendar. Like, schedule it on Outlook. I'm going to work on this thing during this hour. I know that I'm, like, me personally, I'm smartest from like 6:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. Like, it's already it. Like, this is why I'm all over the place right now. It's too late for me. My day is done. But I'm really good from 6:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. So I do all of my like creative work, like if I'm writing blog posts or making videos or creating content. I do all of that work first thing in the morning, because I know I'm sharpest then. I've got a cup of coffee. It's great. You might have a different time of day, but see if you can find that high value activity in the high value time or high energy times a day, and your easier, kind of more repetitive opening mail, putting in data, that kind of thing. If there's more mundane, repetitive tasks when you're already tired, it's not going to make it any worse. So the next is delegate. You think, well, I don't have anyone who reports to me. I hope that you have volunteers. If you're not, we can certainly help you get through the process of recruiting them. You can delegate things to your fundraising volunteers. There's a ton that they can do. They're excited to work for you. They just need to have some direction. So if you feel like there's these repeated tasks, thank you notes, acknowledgements, phone calls that you think they can do effectively, or with a little bit of training, you can delegate to them. This works, of course, for staff as well. But as much as you can get off your plate and saying, could someone else do this as effectively, not even more effective? Could someone do this as effectively as I can? Or am I truly the only person that can do this? Ask that question before you start in on a task. Helping others manage their time as well. Sometimes if you just having a team meeting saying, we're all doing this task, it would actually be a lot easier if just one of us did all of this task. Like, we're all getting the department's mail depending on the, time of day, when we're opening different things. We have to have a meeting. Oh, I got this letter. You got that letter. It's like, okay, let's delegate. Jake is going to get the department's mail every day at 3:00. He's the only one. He'll hand it out to anyone as needed, but if not, he'll kind of sort through the spam and like open the ones that are important, put the checks in, whatever. But to kind of group those and help as a team to figure out, how do we readjust our time as a team so this works for us as well. Allocating time really comes down to scheduling meetings with yourself or scheduling meetings to do things. We are really good about protecting sacred time when we have a meeting on our Outlook calendar. Typically, it's like, I got that Zoom call. Like, they're going to be so disappointed to me if I just ghost them. I can't ghost them. And we have this really high level respect for people, for their time on their Zoom, on their Outlook, whatever. We show up to those meetings, and then we will schedule time for ourselves to work on whatever. And we let interruptions create disruptions in our workflow, or we will schedule things over our time. We're more respectful of other people's time than we are of our own, which is wild to me. But especially if we're in kind of a giving and helping type role, we feel like that's the right thing to do. And a lot of people are like that. I'm like that as well. So trying as much as you can to block time in your calendar that you truly do your deep work that you do, and not schedule over it. Someone says, hey, do you have 3 o'clock available tomorrow? If you don't have anything on your calendar actually marked, you might say, yeah, sure, let's do 3 o'clock. But if you've got like work on that brochure 3 to 4 o'clock, you're like, sorry, I don't have 3, but can you do 2, or can you do 3 o'clock the next day? So just actually putting them on your calendar is sometimes just a little thing that really helps you get over that edge. And you don't have to say why, I plan to use that time for myself. You don't have to say that. You can just say, I'm unavailable that hour, but how about, and then suggest some alternatives. No one's going to get mad at you. In fact, hopefully they're doing that too. They should be doing that exact same thing. And then the last thing is to reprioritize all the time. Like you feel like you get this really great plan in place and you make some adjustments and you work, and then you work for a month and it doesn't feel like it's quite there. Like reevaluate every single week, every single morning if you want to, but kind of look through and say, what are my priorities for today? What are the priorities for the week? Are we working towards getting this thing done this quarter? And constantly be reevaluating of like, there might be new things that jump to the top of your priority list all the time. And even if you don't get everything done, if you're hitting those high points and you're doing that 80% that checks most of your boxes, you're going to bring in revenue for the organization. And then the other stuff tends to matter a little bit less. So we just kind of like go through our to-do list sometimes, whereas if we can prioritize the things that actually move the needle and are constantly reevaluating those things, we can make a big difference. So certainly can take any questions, but before we do, just want to let you all know, if you haven't noticed, we've been putting out a ton of free content on LinkedIn. We're writing almost daily blogs. We're putting out lots of different newsletter stuff and articles, tips and videos and all kinds of things that we just launched with our new site and branding. So if you want to follow us on LinkedIn, there's a ton of free content over there. If you have other nonprofits that you think would benefit, or smaller organizations that maybe don't have the bandwidth for a whole lot, but might want to learn some things, we're putting all kinds of stuff there every day. So this is a new thing that we're doing. Wanted to announce it. You may have seen it already. Some of you are liking and engaging with our stuff. Very much appreciate that. You can go to that link right there, or you can scan that QR code with your phone, which is really fun. Just hold the camera up and then tap the QR code on the screen. It should take you right there. And it would certainly help us if you followed us, because it increases engagement, tells the algorithm that you like our stuff and that people like our stuff. So this is our trying to put out more good information to the world, trying to help the fundraising industry as much as we can. So if you can help us spread the good word, we would certainly appreciate it.